As we mentioned in the last video, one of the things that we can do with JavaScript is to modify and manipulate existing elements. The first step which we need to do is to identify, or you can say select the element. We cannot modify something unless we know what we want to modify. We are here aware that we want to modify the element below an input, so let's see how we can do the same in JavaScript. For now, I will remove these two h1s, create an input, we have to close it, and then just below, I'm going to create an h1 tag, which is going to say test for now. And that h1 of test is going to have an ID property, all lowercase, that's going to say element below input, just like that. Now, if you save that, go back, you can see at the top, we have the input and we have a big heading that says test. There are many ways to select an element. One of the ways is finding an HTML element by an ID. That is the easiest and most efficient way to find an element. We can assign some ID to an element and then select it like so. I'll show you how we can do that right now in the console. We know that our input has an ID of element below input. Great. I'm gonna copy that ID. We can create a constant called L, and that L is going to be equal to document. Document is the whole HTML website. It contains absolutely everything about our whole HTML page. One of the things we have in there is a method called getElementById. We can call it as a method, and then in there we can put our element ID in a string. Now I'm gonna paste element below input. We click enter. Since that is a method, it's gonna return undefined. But now, if we try console logging the element, you should see that we indeed get it. And there we go. We got back an element, an h1. As soon as we hover over it, you can see that it actually appears in the browser. It knows that this is that element we are talking about. Now let's explore the second way of targeting the same element. We can do that. We can target the element by tag name. Consider that for some reasons we want to manipulate all elements of a particular kind. Let's say we want to manipulate all headings in our website. So let's add a new one, which is going to say test1, and there we're going to remove the IDs from both of them. We just need a test. Great. We can also remove the input. Now we have two test h1s. Now if we go back, what we can do is we can target or access the elements by tag name. We can do that like this. Document dot get elements by tag name. Notice how we have an S here. That means that it is plural. It's going to return an array of all elements. And then in there, it's again going to accept a string, but the string this time is going to be the name of the element. If we do it like this, as you can see, we get back an HTML collection which contains two different h1s. Third way of finding HTML elements is finding them by class name. Class names are assigned to elements to style them uniquely. Let's say that we want to style 2 out of our 3 h1s. We can have test, test1, and test2. Now we're going to give the same class only to the first two. So class can be something like test, just like that. Now if we go back, we can access only the elements that have the test class. We can do that like so. Document dot get elements by class name. And then in there, we can pass in that class name. In our case, that's going to be test. If I click enter, you can see we get back an HTML collection that contains only two h1s, not the third one because that one doesn't contain the test class. The last way you can find HTML elements is by CSS selectors. CSS selectors combine multiple classes, IDs, tags name, and many more things to actually select a particular element. To explore CSS selectors, I'm also going to give a class of test to our third h1. But now I'm gonna change the last two h1s to actually be h2s. So if we go back, you can see that we get smaller text right there. Now, our goal is to target only the h2 elements that have the class name of test, but not the h1s that have the class of test. That means that we won't be targeting elements by a class of test. Rather, we need to find all the H2s that have a class of test. To do that, we can use the document dot query selector all. And then in there, you can form that CSS selector. Inside of the string, we're going to say H2 and then dot test. This is going to make sure to find only the H2s that have a class name of test. If I now click enter, take a look. We targeted these two exact elements. Now that we mentioned the query selector, I just want to show you how powerful it is. You can use query selector to replace absolutely all other methods you learned so far. The document, getElementById, getElementBy by class name, tag name, anything. It works like this. Document dot query selector. There are two different possibilities. You can use the query selector if you want to target only one specific element, or you can use the query selector all to target multiple. So, how can you use it to replace everything else? Well, you know that when we have classes, classes start with a dot. So, you can just immediately target elements by class. There we go. We just targeted them by class. We can also add an ID property, and that ID is going to be, for example, heading. We can target the IDs by using the hash symbol, and then we can say heading. And as you can see, we immediately got that heading. Or we can also target elements by tag names. So the only thing you have to do is just say h1, which is going to give us the h1. Or we can also say h2. So the bottom two should be h2s. So query selector and query selector all are really versatile, and there's no need to not use them. You can use query selectors to replace getElementById, getElementBy tag name, class name, anything. Just use query selectors.